So, Dr. Brian Walker, our speaker today, has practiced medicine for many years in various countries. Before he settled into practice as a GP in Serpentine Medical Centre, he has frontline experience treating patients in hospitals, emergency departments, and general practice. If you're familiar with the book Dying to Be, which details near-death experience of Anita Moorjani, it should be noted that Dr. Walker was her GP in Hong Kong. She met up with him some years ago and did an interview which is available on YouTube. Dr. Walker is also a member of the Legislative Council in the Parliament of Western Australia for the Legalise Cannabis Party. May I invite Dr. Walker to lead the guided meditation.
It is a joy to be here. We all have our guided meditation practice, our personal meditation practice. And I would like to lead you in the practice that I follow as a scientist and as a human. And each of you can now, if you choose, as you settle, begin with breathing. Let me breathe in and out. And we notice that the breathing somehow is connected with all that we are. And as we focus on our breath, I invite you to visualize before your eyes the most beautiful diamond you have ever seen. And you can notice how it sparkles and it sits there whether small or large. And you can come close to that beautiful diamond. And as you come closer, approach it and realize, in this existence, you can come so close that you begin to become one with that sparkling, beautiful diamond. Allow yourself to find yourself entering into that beautiful stone. And notice how your body no longer matters. You are part now of creation. And feel as you go deeper that you can see more. And you notice, if you could see clearly enough, you could even notice getting closer and closer to the structure of that stone. And notice, it is made up entirely of carbon in the most beautiful way. And allow yourself to approach one of those carbon atoms. And come closer. Give it a color, if you wish, or not. And approach that colored atom and notice as you get closer how the rest of the diamond has now vanished and you see an atom. And you can notice as you get closer, there are other parts to it, different colors. Come closer. See those colors. Come closer. Go deeper. And allow one of those colored parts, a proton or a neutron, allow it to break open and look and see with the inner eye. Different things emerge and get closer. And breathe gently and notice the colors of those as they break apart and get closer and deeper, and notice one of those colors. You can give it a name if you like, a muon, gluon, quark, boson. You can do that if you wish. But notice one. And come closer and deeper and go deeper. And as you breathe, notice that that one can break open again and goes deeper. And as you go deeper and see the ball suddenly emerge, and notice the sounds around you have now vanished, and a voice is all that remains. And see one of those broken balls emerge and give it a color. And as you do that, notice the colors of all the others. And go closer and deeper. And as you breathe, go close to one of those parts of a part. And as you go deeper, and as you focus on your breath, and silently approach that last color, notice it break apart. And as it breaks apart, notice that one part remains. And if you observe, you can see the color. But imagine you look from the corner of your eye, and that part of a part of a part is now just a wave. The fundamental building block of all existence is that wave. Your body no longer exists. The sounds simply accentuate how close you are to that energy. And as you approach that wave in your mind's eye, allow yourself to merge with the energy and be taken deep into nothingness of energy. And as you float at the speed of light, look around and see that there is nothing left. And on that wave, where have you come from? Where do you go? Relax, focus, and let it be as you observe yourself floating in nothing. Feel the peace. Notice the breathing vanish gently. Absorb the nothingness and be at peace. feel free to stay in nothingness. And as you look closely at that energy, that light, notice how bright it can become. And allow yourself gradually to pull back a little and notice how that light now becomes something solid. And notice the light in that solid. And allow yourself to pull back a little more and see the other balls of light come together to form something else. And as you pull back even more, notice how yet more pull together. And as you pull back, notice that light-filled atom. And as you pull back further, notice the diamond begins to appear, and it shines. It shines with an eternal light. And you can pull back a little more and notice the face of that diamond. And pull back a little further and notice that sparkling, beautiful diamond. And as in your mind's eye you look further around and notice your body has reappeared and is also filled with light. And look further and see that all existence is filled with that same light. And you can return to today, to now, knowing that there's an unknowable essence, and it is beautiful. Life is beautiful, is it not? Our world is beautiful, is it not? But today, I will speak to you about fear. That's a heavenly messenger. There's that famous statement at the outbreak of the Americans' entry into the war, when the president said, "There is nothing to fear but fear itself." I wonder how many people then thought it's all right for him sitting in a safe room in the middle of America, but we're going to have sent people out into the dark, out in danger. People are going to be hurt. People are going to die. I'm frightened. And I don't know about you, but when I look at the world in which I live just now, I see a lot of frightened people. In fact, it seems as if we're designed to be frightened. Look at news. The unexpected has happened. Bad things are happening to good people, and bad people are hurting bad people. And everywhere you turn, you see reasons to be scared. I'm of an age when I remember being shot at in a guerrilla war, and parents who would take their weapons with them, check them in at the bar, enjoy a drink with friends, check their weapons out and travel back home, knowing we could be shot at and killed, as many were, on the way home. There were maybe grounds for fear, and they were justifiable grounds for fear. I think of my time, however, as a child, when I was allowed to play outside. My parents were not frightened that we would be kidnapped, or tortured, or lost. Although we were living in a jungle at the time, well, a cleared jungle, but there were cobras, there were terrorists, there was the occasional tiger. And as we move forward in time, I see in our society that children can no longer play in the streets because parents are frightened that the children may get kidnapped or abused. Indeed, it happens that children themselves are not safe. In my clinic, in my practice, when I'm dealing with mental health problems and physical problems, I'm finding that most often trauma lies at the bottom, and with that trauma comes fear. So on a daily basis in my practice, I confront myself with fear of others. And the reason for choosing the topic today is to allow ourselves to get comfortable with the concept of fear as being something we don't need to have. So why is it there? Is it actually a heavenly messenger? Is it useful? Does it destroy us? And like all things, I think we can say maybe two at the same time. It can be good and it can be bad. What is the nature of fear? What is the Buddhist approach to the nature of fear? Well, it's a very natural human reaction, is it not? I saw a beautiful cat this evening walking into this centre. It's a gorgeous thing. Imagine it a lot bigger, with bigger teeth and claws, and call it a tiger. We'd have a very different feel, would we not? And so we're aware of these things, and they are a warning that we ought not to let tigers in, but cats are okay. So, fear can be useful. The problem might exist if we mistake a cat for a tiger or a tiger for a cat. We've seen examples where people have climbed over the fence into the tiger's enclosure, and the outcome has not been favourable to the people. Tigers were happy. So perhaps we ought to be asking ourselves, are we really looking at the situation correctly? What is the nature of fear, and should I be frightened? The origin of fear we can look at. Well, what does fear mean for me? It means I might lose my life, or playing with the tiger, lose my arm, or more. And one of the problems that we have to confront ourselves with is that we think everything is going to carry on as before. Nothing changes. But we know that every day, every second, things are changing. Maybe I don't want things to change. Maybe I like them just the way they are. As one of my colleagues, he likes things to be just the way they always have been. So when he walks from the office to the bus, it has to be the same way. He can't take a separate way. It has to be this way. On the desk, things have to be just right. Otherwise, he's uncomfortable. He works in my office, and the emails, he has to have the emails sorted. Otherwise, he's deeply, deeply uncomfortable. In fact, he's frightened of change. I think I was a shock to him. But he is also attached to the things which he finds comfortable and doesn't want them changed because he is comfortable with that, which also means there is no progress. And he's comfortable with no progress. So perhaps one of the reasons we ought to be fearful of fear is that it keeps us comfortable when we should not be comfortable. When we think that things will always be the same when patently they are not. So when you try to hold on to things and keep them just the way they are, then fear will arise. Well, in my own life, my youngest son has just left home to go to university in Melbourne. And I mourn that still because things have not changed for the better for me. I've lost my youngest son. My older son is leaving to join the Navy shortly, where he may in fact find himself in a war. Should I be fearful? Or should I be prepared that life will change and all is good? We all face this. But probably one of the reasons we ought to reconsider this is the concept, this is very much a Buddhist concept, that I don't exist. You don't exist. In fact, the guided meditation I took you to today, you all recognized, I'm sure, is to a place where nothing exists. I don't know how you felt, but when I went to that place, I was floating in nothing, and it felt good. Maybe that's where we belong. But it's not, because we are here, we are now, and we are experiencing something, not nothing. And perhaps that very contrast allows us to feel fear. And because of that, we're attached to ourselves. I see this in my practice again on a daily basis. People coming to me and saying, I think I might have cancer. I think I might have a weak heart. Fix me. I'm frightened. No, they don't say they're frightened, but they're clearly in fear. So when you're attached to this illusion of self, then anything which harms that, I'm frightened of. I want it fixed. I'm not going to grow. I had a patient today, I'll tell you this, who said to me, I have trouble breathing. The specialist says I have 50% of my lung function left. And I need medicine. And I said, yes. How do you feel, though, about giving up smoking? You're smoking 30 cigarettes a day. Oh, it used to be 60. This is better. That's true. It's my conversation today, 60. But still, she wanted medicine to help her breathe and at the same time not breathe. And there she's living in fear that things are going to get worse. Well, she's right to be afraid it will get worse. And I know what her death will be like, and it is not pretty, so I would be frightened for her. But maybe she's comfortable with that. Maybe she's come to terms with what might happen, and she's happy with it because what she wants is this. I suspect, however, it's because she hasn't thought it through. Which makes me wonder about the next step, of course, which, of course, is mindfulness. Am I mindful of who I am, what I am, where I am, why I am? Can I learn from this and live in the now? Am I brave enough to overcome my fears, to allow things to happen? Funny word, that, allow. If I allow things, I'm no longer in control. Someone else or something else is in control. But when I allow, I accept. And that's something that we ought to be aware of. Do we practice it? Because it's about keeping ourselves safe. And the question I have for myself is, who is safe? Which of us is safe? which of us can guarantee that we will arrive home this evening safe? And that allows the newspapers to sell newspapers and the news to actually get people hooked into the news. You are not safe. So we have a society just now which is actually very much fixated on working on our fears. And we, how do we respond? Do we really want to go down that path? Parents always want to save their children, help their children, protect their children. I read a story a little while back about a house fire, and the father ran into a burning house to save his children, and all praise, he did. He ran in 4 times to save 4 children, at great risk to his own life, of course, but brought them out. Which one of us as a parent would not do that? Forget yourself. Overcome your fear to do what is right. Why? Because we love. Because we love. Which makes me wonder, if I was walking by a house burning with 4 children inside, would I run inside to save those children? And would it be because I love? So we find that overcoming fear probably is a matter of how much love do I have and how much courage do I have to confront myself. I wonder how we can get to that in all aspects of our lives, that fear now becomes something I can overcome with my mindful presence. And I can combat the fear by being mindful and focusing on love. Because if we can, as a society, do that, then every single one of us would be happy to run into a building house, or another area where we need to put ourselves at risk, not because we are without fear, but because we love, we serve, we have a higher purpose to do what is right. And fear now becomes secondary. And I wonder if we can call that cultivating compassion, if we can call that metta, the loving kindness. It may be what we do when we, again, that beautiful cat, people might know I like cats. That cat might be in danger and I could run to pick up that cat. But would I do the same thing for, say, a mouse? A dog, certainly. A dingo? Or something which isn't quite so nice? Would I be as keen to put myself at risk? And that really is where the metta comes in. And you could, perhaps, you've all done this, the mindfulness, the metta mindfulness meditation. And you know about it. Let's look at how I feel about myself and where I am in my life, and extend that to my family, to my loved ones. And I go beyond that, and I can imagine this love extending to, let's say you live in an apartment, the people who live there, my neighbours. And then as you get deeper and deeper into expressing this meditative love for those around you, even those who are not nice, then into the village and beyond that, into the city and beyond that, into the state and beyond that, into the nation, and finally beyond that, into the world beyond, which needs every ounce of metta we can give. And then we look at what's happening, and with that mindfulness, with that spirit of metta, we can then accept that it might not work. We can let go. I have done what I can because it is right. And I'm not going to blame anyone else for things that go on. I have done. I have worked. I have served. And I have let go of the outcomes. Because the outcomes aren't important. What is important is what I do I can let go of that and let go of the fear of failure. So there's a wide range of things that we can learn as to how do we combat something which happens every day to us in our lives. Is fear important? Well, it ruins many lives. I see this again every day in my clinic. People coming in fear. Doctor, I might die. And I say, yes. And they get a bit shocked. You're not going to save me? I say, well, I might. But yeah, you certainly might die. What's the problem, though? And they kind of sit back and say, well, I'm not well. Yes. Let's talk about how we're going to deal with this. I'm not going to click my fingers and you're suddenly going to live again. I'm not a magician with a magic wand. So your fear you've got just now, I'm not speaking to them like this, of course. There's a very different way of speaking. But the fear isn't about, I'm going to fix every problem. No, you are going to fix things. I am going to help. We're going to take it step by step, bite by bite. The famous expression, how do you eat an elephant? That's one bite at a time. And this is something that we need to practice as well when fear comes upon us. Let's take, for example, the question here of, I have got a huge problem to deal with. Let's take a huge tax bill, $130,000 tax bill. And some people will say, I can't do this, I'm going to kill myself, and some people do. We saw this happen just recently with the robo-debt and the Centrelink, $8,000 debt, and the person killed himself. Or you could say to yourself, I've been rather stupid. I've been rather stupid with my finances, but I earned well last year, and I'm happy to pay my tax because people need that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop being stupid and work out a way to pay this back with what I'm doing already, because I can do this. I can take to my power that which needs to be done. It's perhaps useful that we fear, because, of course, when I took you this meditation is to a place where there is nothing, there is no suffering, there is no self. But we have self here, we have suffering, life is suffering. And what we need to be doing is using this heavenly messenger to work out, how am I going to recognize? How am I going to understand? And how can I follow? How can I follow the Eightfold Path to achieving what? The journey. And that requires, of course, that if I'm going to set out on that path, as we all are, we need the courage to do so, because it is not an easy path. And achieving the courage comes through gaining wisdom. And with that, it seems to me, I've had a pretty quick overview of one of the basic tenets of what the Buddha taught us. What I would love to do just now is to take you on a journey, a short journey, through a number of stories. And you might find this a little bit strange. Now, before I step off on that journey, we have to consider that the origin of fear probably is something which all of us grapple with. Why should I be frightened of this? And that leads, of course, to the question about the no self. How do I know there's no self? Because if I hit my head against that table, it's going to hurt a lot. So certainly there's a self. And so what does it all mean with this no self? And you can find very quickly there's reasons not to actually believe that there is a different path in life. I wonder what it's like when you realize that there's conflict coming and you can't quite answer it. You must, or you must not, begin to question this, because it's incredibly important that we get to some idea of where we are going to be in our path, because the path always goes on. You could imagine the path never ending, could you not? And it never ends. You might, in a moment, consider that there are options we can take in recognizing how best to move forward. And eventually we will find some path which means something for us. But sooner or later, you are going to want to have a closer look at what am I actually doing. The challenge now is to actually make this practical for yourself today. And the second most important thing is to recognize that mindfulness and presence in the living in the moment is an incredibly important part of how this actually happens. And that we need to bring in this loving kindness, make it manifest in our own lives so that we can move forward in loving kindness to all beings and letting go finally. And as you do this, you will realize that there is a way forward in every situation which allows me to overcome the fear. And the third important message is to realize that the first important message has already been forgotten. As we move on, we can now begin to look at those stories to see how they actually will fit together to explain what I've just been through. So I'm going to read you a story that I have had great pleasure in crafting for you. It's actually based on my life in Germany, because I spent many years living in Germany as a German, speaking German, very happy with my life there. But at the same time also wondering which direction do I go in, because I was lost. I was in a difficult place. And I suppose you could say it's where my meditative practice started. But once, when I was living in Germany, I went to Munich, a lovely city, and the Isar River flows through Munich. And Germans love their nature. I went wandering in that beautiful nature. It's full of beauty. There was that river Isar flowing from the Alps, ice cold, melted snow and ice, coming from mighty mountains and through the alpine valleys. It brought life wherever it went. The river is strong and mighty. But I looked at it as it flooded past me and wondering if it ever feared losing its way. It may have worried about being divided into small streams or getting trapped in a stagnant pond. In my mind, I heard it speak one day as it met an old tree that had been standing by its banks for centuries. And the tree said, "River, you are not just water flowing. You are part of the mountains, the rain, the sea, and even the clouds. You see, your fear comes from thinking you are separate." But as I was listening to the tree, I looked into a house that was built beside the river, a beautiful, old-fashioned Bavarian house with garden. Clearly, in that garden was a gardener who loved flowers dearly. And focus on these words, my friends, focus. Because each plant was tended with great care. And I spoke to those flowers as I stood there, speaking kindly to them, ensuring, of course, they were nourished. No doubt the garden had long flourished, and I knew people had come from far and wide to admire the beautiful flowers. In the alpine region, there is often a strong wind, the föhn, which often blows through, and many of the flowers could be damaged. Any gardener would feel a deep sorrow and fear for the future of the garden. But then gardeners remember something really important. The wind is also a part of the garden, just as much as the sun and rain. And that reminded me of the winds at our monastery, which took me to the story of a remote monastery, where a wise monk and his students spent weeks creating an intricate and beautiful mandala, a beautiful symbol of the universe. Now the mandala was crafted with the utmost care. Each grain of sand was placed with intention and precision. Bear in mind, focus on this, my friends. When it was finally complete, the students marveled at its beauty, but also felt a fear of losing it. What if a breeze comes and blows it away, they worried. The wise monk smiled and said, "That is the very nature of life. All things are impermanent, like this mandala. It teaches us that beauty exists not to be held onto, but to be experienced fully in the moment." And the monk then told of a weary traveller who once came upon a wise sage meditating under a tree. The traveller was tired of his endless journey, constantly searching for peace and fulfillment, but finding only fear and dissatisfaction. The sage smiled and shared with him the 4 noble truths, explaining that suffering and fear are inherent parts of life due to our attachments and desires. But there is a path, the 8-fold path, that leads away from this suffering. It's a journey of understanding, of mindful living, and of letting go of attachments. And he told that wise old monk, that sage, of travelling through mountains to find himself high on a mountain peak. There was an old temple where a single lantern burned brightly through the darkest nights. People from all around came to see this lantern, believing it held a secret in overcoming fear. One night, a young monk asked the head priest, "How does this lantern keep burning so brightly even when the storm rages outside?" The priest replied, "This lantern is fueled by the oil of wisdom. It burns with the understanding of impermanence and the courage to face all things with equanimity. When we see the nature of reality clearly, fear cannot extinguish our light." And as you continue to relax, you can begin to notice you let go of fear and embrace the present moment. And as you allow a deep sense of peace and connection to grow within you, you can then understand, as the wise monk at the old temple realized, that wisdom was not just knowledge, but a deep inner strength that comes from accepting life as it is. And as he meditated on this, he felt his own fears dissolve, replaced by a calm courage that flowed from within. And as the traveller listened intently, something in him began to change. He realized that his fear was not an enemy, but a guide, showing him where he was still attached, still clinging. He thanked the sage and continued his journey with a newfound lightness, knowing that he was now on the path to true freedom. And with that, the wise monk gently brushed his hand over the mandala, letting the sand scatter. The students watched in awe and realized that their fear of loss was simply a misunderstanding of life's true nature. They felt lighter, understanding that letting go brings freedom. And standing at that garden, I could realize that our love and care are not just for the flowers, but for everything that contributed to their growth. So, with compassion and kindness, we tend to the damaged flowers, knowing that all things are interconnected, and in nurturing one, we nurture all. We can feel our fear fade away. Knowing that in truth, the tree knew that we are connected to everything, and we cannot be lost. The river realized that it had been clinging to a false sense of being separate, of being a single entity, and with this realization, it felt a profound peace and flowed freely without fear, which is what you already have known in your dreams and prayers, and maybe Ajahn Brahm can agree. And that, my friends, is my experience. Does anyone here feel their heart has been spoken to? Do I have any questions?
Dr. Walker, thank you so much for your talk. On the subject of fear, could you please talk about fear at the time of death and your experiences, particularly with your patients who have been successful in letting go of that fear and having a good death, and others who have not unfortunately been so successful? What differentiates them in particular?
Oh, what a wonderful question. I get people coming to me who are shortly before death. I have a reputation there for looking at cancer differently, for example. And not everyone, but some people are, how can I put this, ready to listen. So they come and say, I'm going to die. And I could say, yes. I often do, in fact. But sometimes I say, tell me, what makes you think you're alive? Not everyone can bear that question. And then we start a long discussion as to, okay, there's a chance that we can fix this and that you will live a while longer, a month, a year, 10 years. But sometime in the future, not too long from now perhaps, you will pass away. So what is it about right now and death right now that is the problem? Because death is an inevitable thing. And now we start engaging with the quality of, what is life, what is death, who am I, why am I? And I find that a terrible shame that for many people, this question is only asked in the last stages of life. I think if we had this concept at an early stage, we'd probably live better. I have worked in palliative medicine as well, at least working in the country in my hospital there with 4 clinics. I was the person responsible for managing the phase of death. And it was a great privilege to help people at that difficult time. But people ask me at times, when should palliative care start? And I thought about that for a moment, and I said, palliative care should begin at birth. Because palliative care now is understood as, in the last stages of life, you help them to have a comfortable life and a comfortable passing into death. Why don't we start that all through life? Why do we have to punish people? Why do we have to threaten? Why do we have to make people feel bullied or uncomfortable? Why don't we treat everybody as a precious being that is on a pathway through life to death and needs to be treasured? Why don't we do that? I haven't yet found the answer for it. I've seen many people die. In fact, one of the troubles I've had is actually switching the machines off. Okay? Because even if they're brain dead, it's an awesome, in that sense, it's full of awesome process. And one of the worst experiences of my life was of doing transplant medicine, which of course saves lives. But in this particular case, there was an 11-year-old boy with a bit of brain hanging out of his ear, brain dead, and we were going to take every single last organ and give them to other people to live. Good. So there I was helping at the operation, a boy who came onto the table, and the difficult thing was he looked exactly like my then 11-year-old son. And to this day, it pains me. So my experience of death is very varied, from beautiful to terrifying. And I've had people there who have died a terrible death in fear because they have not engaged with the actual existence of life. There's one woman in particular who, she's religious, but didn't actually believe. And I found that because some people come to me and say, Doc, I'm going to die, and they're frightened. And I say, listen, especially they've been tormenting me with trying to make me a Christian by giving me pamphlets and Bibles. And I said, listen, yes, but tell me, are you a real Christian or a fake Christian? And they said, what? And I said, well, if you're a real Christian, you would see this as a path towards living with the Lord forevermore. And that's a good thing. But you're frightened by it, so tell me about that. And this particular woman, I didn't go down because that can be very, very painful. It's a conversation to be had. This particular woman I have in mind wasn't able to speak about this, and so she was terrified. She was going into the darkness, and she didn't want to go there. She was frightened of it. She didn't have any concept of what was beyond there apart from, I don't know. And if you don't know, then it's terrifying. Another woman in exactly the same hospital just a little while later was absolutely confident that she was going to a better place, and she was so peaceful when she passed. It was obvious. So I think the difference between having a good death and a bad death, if you can talk about having a good death at all, and you can, I think, is the extent to which I have engaged with who am I and where am I going. And sometimes I will take people to the place I took you today. That understanding that the underpinning of all life isn't molecular, isn't the atoms there, it's actually the energy which underpins the very foundations of our life, is actually an electromagnetic wave traveling at the speed of light, which builds up every aspect of our lives. This microphone here, this building here, every single atom of every single part of our structure, including ourselves, is based on the final baryon, which is the underlying foundational structure, is actually, when you look at it, an electromagnetic wave traveling at the speed of light. So all of our existence is technically, and I'm talking here from a scientific point of view, we are all distortions of the space-time continuum. And not everyone can hear that. We are energetic beings, we are vibrational beings, we are not who we think we are. But if we're focused on this three-dimensional, and that's my bank account here, and I haven't organized my affairs here, and I really don't want to go into the darkness because although the priest says so, I don't believe, then we are very fixed on what doesn't exist. And then you're terrified. So it's a long answer. Bottom line is I don't know.
Thank you. I think there was a lot in there that did speak to me, and I think others. You talked about energy, and I've had discussions with you, and you've been very generous with your time in the past, and been very kind to me. I recall one particular discussion, and I don't know if everybody knows this about you, but you happen to be a martial arts practitioner. And you talked about stillness with me once, and looking at in a martial arts move with an opponent and seeing the other person in terms of energy rather than a fixed entity. Could you please speak a bit more about that? And you talked about loving kindness earlier today. Would that sort of, or does that help you cultivate loving kindness?
You asked too many good questions. My martial arts, my black belts are in Kendo and Iaido, the Japanese sword fighting. And when you first start out in any martial art, it's very physical. The more you progress, the more you realize it's actually mental. I vividly recall the chief instructor of the Japanese Imperial Guard educating the British Kendo National Squad into real Kendo. And they were flying all over you normally don't fall in Kendo, but these were flying and falling all over the place. This little man here, dressed in white, these big hulking brutes, and they were just, and he didn't seem to move at all, and they would fall, and fall, and fall. And it wasn't because he was stronger, he certainly wasn't. It's because he was different. Now, in the Japanese martial arts, in fact, I think in all martial arts, we realize that force, just useful at times, but force isn't the key. It's mind. And in the Japanese sword arts, there's a tradition here, I think it's all over the world, you never ever draw a sword unless you're either going to clean it or you're going to kill someone with it. Sword is the only weapon that's used purely for warfare. You can't peel potatoes with it, you can't dig a hole with it, it's only for killing people. So there you are, and the Buddha, the sense of the martial intent. You're there, there's your opponent there, you have your sword in your hand, and one of you is going to die. It's inevitable. So the instant you step out there, the instant you draw your sword, at that moment you are prepared to die. If you can't do that, you shouldn't be there. And what you do is you begin to gaze through that person. The Japanese, it's like you gaze through the person as if towards a distant mountain. And everything you do, the person is there, but you're not reacting, you're looking through that person. He doesn't exist. Now, that is a very powerful approach to preparing for your own death, but also to moving forward past difficulties. If I look at the problems and gaze through them as towards a distant mountain, I'm going to do these things, and the problems vanish because I am now beyond that. The fear is not part of it. I have overcome fear. It's very powerful. A friend of mine, he came to visit me in Hong Kong, my fighting partner, and his Chinese wife was watching us practice, and she says, "What is it," she says, "with the eyes?" Because you have to, the spirit actually is expressed through the face, the eyes. And she thought we were looking kind of funny. I said, "Okay, fine. So here's a wooden sword, a bokken, and I'll hold the bokken. This is how you hold it. This is how you hold the handle. This is how you stand, and this is how you take the guard." Fine. So she stood there, and I stood there. I said, "No, I'm going to look at you." So I looked at her as if I was looking at her husband with those same eyes. I did nothing more. I just stood there and looked, and she took a step backwards. She took a step backwards because she felt the power come through. There's a spirit, there's an energy in all of us. And we know it. There's a counter-transference feeling. If you see someone and you know there's a certain... If you look at someone and think, I'm bored with you, or I'm really angry with you, what you're basically feeling is this person's thought about yourself. So we can actually sense. We are vibrational creatures. We can sense these things. And we think we're just three-dimensional. We're not. We're fourth-dimensional. So the martial arts there is actually going into that, the energy behind that. Now, you could just theorize and say, yes, this is what you do, but actually, if you live it, you're actually at a different level. And I've used martial arts actually in psychiatry when people wanted to attack me. Exactly the same thing. I didn't have a sword in my hands, or indeed my jiu-jitsu, but I just took a position and looked, and the person who wanted to attack me just changed. Okay, and so there's something going on with that. Now, apply that thought to fear. Apply that to the fear of death. How am I behaving inside here? What's my internal life? What's my energy like here? What is my real belief? Not what I think I believe. And that this is here an existential thing here. Do I practice what I preach? Am I being true to myself? These are important questions, and I don't think there's any answer for that, but there's questions we ought to be asking ourselves. Okay, how am I really? Am I just playing with people, or do I really, really believe deep down in my soul? Again, I don't know.
Thank you, Doctor, for the inspiring and interesting talk this evening. My question is, some people are deeply fearful of small insects like spiders. They're certainly not going to kill you. So it's not for your life that you are fearful of. So is it something else that is a medically proven thing or anything like that? My second part of the question is, how do you think you can overcome it? And could you spoke about mindfully sending metta. Is sending metta to all beings, including that little animal, kind of going to solve that problem?
I have yet to find any love for a mosquito in my room. When I think about it, I can look at that as a food supply for some other insects and some other birds, so it's a useful thing, but not in my room at night when I'm trying to sleep. So there's probably limits to that. The fear you can get funny fears of things. Redback spiders, are they dangerous really? Well, they're a nasty bite, but I personally think the white-tailed spider's got more problems with their skin. So why am I not frightened of white-tailed spiders as much as I am of redbacks? It's just the female redback. It's probably true of all female life, actually. And I am afraid of my wife, in the nicest way. But phobias is not actually a fear. Phobia is it's a medical state, possibly from some form of trauma, possibly just unspoken fears. Like children can have fears of the monsters under the bed. I don't know what's there. Once you get to know something, you can maybe appreciate it. Now, one of my fears actually is cobras. Other snakes don't bother me, but cobras bother me a lot. I know why. It's an event of my time in Malaysia. There's not that many cobras going around here. The dugites, I'm not particularly frightened of. I don't play with them, but I'm not frightened of them. So understanding how to behave with them. In fact, the one good thing, if you were frightened of snakes, is to go to the Armadale Reptile Centre and learn how to be a snake wrangler. That would take some of the fear away, if you can overcome the fear in the first place. Yes, there's a question here of is it fearful to be not walk in the grass because there may be snakes, or is it prudence, caution? It's a difficult one. It depends on how you feel inside. I don't particularly want to risk being bitten by a snake by walking barefoot through the grass of someone else's place, or indeed in my own place if I haven't cut the grass. But that may just be prudent, and not. You can rush into things not being fearful because you're just not aware. So fear, as I said initially, has a good purpose in keeping me, if it's a tiger or a pussycat, there's a difference, know the difference, and behave accordingly. But I'm not going to be afraid of a tiger if it's behind glass. Whereas I look at a cobra, if I turn a book of a page and there's a cobra snake looking at it like that, I think, ooh, I jump back a bit. That is not normal. Okay, so that's a medical thing. You can fix that with hypnosis. There's good ways of doing that, or desensitization. You can do that as well. So you can actually treat what's actually happening inside here, the mental processes. So you're actually just desensitizing yourself to an irrational fear. But on the other hand, playing with a cobra would not be a good idea. Say again?
We took the mood up and I didn't want to take it down again with my questions.
Go on, let's go for it, shall we? You, please, sir.
I'll bring it right back down again. Given what you've just described, the nature of the system that you're trying to engage in and sort of the horrific momentum of the sort of the system built on fear that sort of perpetuates itself, how do you not despair? How do you find hope and the ability to see a future for yourself and for the world?
Because I believe. I believe in people, I believe the truth will out, and I believe that good overcomes evil. What's your question?
Run, Bill, run. My question was about fear of grief. So, just for a light story, right? So I live near Hyde Park, and it has beautiful trees. But unfortunately, this little short old borer has got into the trees, and quite a number of beautiful big trees, which probably are close to 100 years, need to be cut down. And then there's, I've watched the redevelopment of the lake and the beautiful vegetation they've put in the middle of the lake. Apparently all that has to go. And so I found myself actually feeling fear, thinking, oh, I love my park, but I don't want to go down there because if I see the trees cut down, I'll be heartbroken, I'll be so sad, and I'm afraid of the grief that I would feel. Now, I can translate that to my parents who are getting older, but it's that fear of experiencing grief. And I'm wondering how you deal with that as a GP, because you are treating the patients, but you have the family around.
Oh, I could tell so many stories.
Yeah.
The Blue Tree Foundation, that was one of my patients out in Muckenwooden. So those blue trees you see around about that was started by the family, yes. What he did actually, he with his girlfriend, they had a kind of a tree in the back here in the paddock, and they painted it blue to see if his father would notice. So that's how come that came about. When he killed himself, that's a terrible story actually. The family thought long and hard, we'll do this and let people just think. Oh, tell you a funny story about grief in that case. This is here from Scotland, when I was working in the Western Isles of Scotland. So it was a place where the Gaelic language was the mother tongue of most of the people there, and the English was a bit different. And the way you would express things is to, I'll see you tomorrow if the Lord spares me. Okay, always. It was always, I could be killed tomorrow, so I'll see you tomorrow if the Lord spares me. So this woman would say all the time, doctor, 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 she says, I'll be dead the morn if the Lord spares me. Every single time. And because I'm going to die. And she was elderly. And every single time, I went by every 2 weeks, doctor, doctor, I'll be dead the morn if the Lord spares me. So one day I said, listen, Mrs. MacLeod, yes. What about if you get Colin McRae? He's the undertaker in Stornoway. Should we have informed Colin McRae? For what would we be doing that then, doctor? I said, well, you can never be sure what's going to happen tomorrow, can we now? And take preparations. And that afternoon, my then sister-in-law says, Brian, have you been selling coffins? Well, no, the whole island. They just loved it. But in the same place was another woman there. She was in a widow's weeds, black, all black. And she had been since the death of her fiancé. This is 1994. And her fiancé was killed in the beaches of Normandy in 1944. So she'd been mourning for 50 years. That's not right. Grief it can be devastating. The grief, of course, is like when you're at the station just now and the train is pulling away, your family is there, they're going away, you may never see them again. In the old days when there was no transport, if you emigrated from the UK to Australia, that was it, you're never going to see each other again. There's a white handkerchief on the window as they're waving bye-bye, and it gets smaller and smaller, and then it vanishes, and that's grief. And then after a while you turn back to life again, because that's a loss. So grief is always the fear of loss, is it not? Now, I mentioned earlier my son. He was a medical registrar, an ED registrar in Mackay, and he killed himself. And that was. I've never felt such pain before, and I vividly recall as I was carrying his coffin to the hearse out of the church with his elder brother and 4 others. The devastating feelings which even now bring me to tears, and thinking I'll never get over this, and I probably never will, but not to that same extent. The tears have gone because it's been replaced with the knowledge that love is there and he'll be there and I'll smack him when I see him again. So that does make sense. So it's a matter of dealing with the fact that this is something and nothing stays the same. We live in impermanence, and therefore we welcome this because now we can move on to other things, but always treasuring and always loving, because that's what gives me the strength to carry on. So fear of grief. Now this is here the loss we've got here. I think I'd look at the idiot politicians who are letting this happen, so I'd be angry with that. So you can turn grief into anger at what people are doing. I've got lost this here, and there's other ways of dealing with it, but recognizing that there's a loss there, and then saying, I want to do something about this, whether it's plant more trees, okay, which would be a good thing to do, or whether it's to actually doing something which brings meaning into this. This death will not be for no meaning. This has a meaning, and I will make it have a meaning. And the same thing for loss, any kind of loss. It must have a meaning. Does that answer it? sort of. I've bored you all. Good. The job is done.
It looked like it.
Well, I thank you all for listening, and it was a joy to speak with you.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Ariel, thank you. Thank you all.